Thank you for joining us on WQPH 89.3 FM Shirley Fitchburg, Queen of Perpetual Help, and welcome to another edition of Local Matters. October is Respect Life Month. Now, on this week's broadcast, we continue with the Deacons Roundtable, and that is from our sister station, WSFI. WSFICatholicRadio.org. A special thank you to Angela Tomlinson for producing this broadcast. This is part 2 of this series, and they will be going into different topics such as capital punishment and end-of-life issues. Before that, we will have a few important messages from WQPH. Thank you for listening to WQPH 89.3 FM Shirley Fitchburg, Queen of Perpetual Help, and to another episode of Local Matters. And we're here again to make a few exciting announcements.
Something very dear to my heart. We have been putting up these images 4 feet by 8 feet of the Divine Mercy. The best representation, I think, in our radio area is what Father Dolan did to put 2 on one side of one door of St. Camilla's Church, right?
Yes.
It's fabulous. It's a way to evangelize people. So if you like to evangelize, we ask you to think about if you'd like to be a member of the Missionaries of Divine Mercy. We'll give you more information. Stay tuned.
Some of these Divine Mercy signs are all over at this point. They're in Cambridge, they're in Brighton, they're in Rockland.
It's St. Joseph Church in Medford.
St. Joseph Church, very local.
And the one we ask you to pray for is the one that we had for Our Lady, Queen of the Universe in East Boston. So people flying by Logan Airport, guess what? They're going to see Divine Mercy.
That'll be beautiful.
Huh?
Yes.
So we've been watching that. So now we need to raise probably $9,000 to do that. So if you'd like to do a donation or be a sponsor of an image, you could send us an email and we can talk to you personally.
We are looking for underwriters that will be available to cover some of our shows. The underwriters can be a local organization, a local business, anyone that would like to sponsor one of our local shows that they're on Saturdays and Sundays, but they're also, the Children's Rosary is also on during the week, and we have other things that are available.
Jeannie, we used to do this. It could be in memory of somebody. So, for example, when a certain friend of ours died, we asked to be an underwriter in memory of a person's soul or memory. I love that idea. We have to get some good ideas of how we can get every soul out of purgatory. Our Italian trip, which we have 3 seats left to go, Jeannie just consented to come with us to Italy, and we're going down to see Padre Pio.
Yes.
Today's his feast day when we're talking to you. We'd love some people that want to go on the trip of a lifetime to go to San Damiano, where the rosary is prayed 3 times a day in English and Latin. And then we're going to go down to see Padre Pio and who else? The Cave of St. Michael. So if you'd like some information about that,
well, they can go on our website at WQPHradio.org, and we should have some information about it there. If you want to learn more about the upcoming events, I know we're working on a calendar to show you all the things that will be coming up on WQPH and our exciting fall events. WQPHradio.org. You can also get access to our podcast of our local programming. You can listen to it anytime you want if you felt like you missed a show. Or you can also look at any of the prayers and announcements that are on the website.
Right. And most importantly, which I find a great ask, is to request a Mass that is prayed in Africa. Usually the same day as you request it. The stipend is $10, so you can request a Mass. Today, the woman that helps me with my house asked me to pray for her friend we want to put her on the prayer line, esophageal cancer, and she has to go see the doctor. So if you've ever had an illness like this, like I have had, when you know you have to go back to the Dana-Farber, it gets time for a Mass to be offered for a good result if that's what God wants for you. So don't forget that. You can get a Mass on our website. Just request a Mass.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will be keeping you in our prayers, and hopefully you will keep us in your prayers. And thank you for listening to WQPH, and stay tuned for more of Local Matters.
We're back from our break here at WSFI 88.5 on your FM dial. Welcome to the Deacons Roundtable. I'm here with Deacon Dick Kudzik and Deacon Dave Egan, and we're missing our good friend Deacon Mike Alandi, who is not here today, but we wish him and his family the best. And Deacon Dave, you wanted to bring up another perspective on the pro-life.
So one of the things I'd like to bring up is capital punishment, because it's a nice hot-button issue that has been there for a very long time. When we were talking during the break at the table here, I said that one of the things I very much remember when I was in formation, we happened to have 2 police officers in our class. And one of the, during part of some of the moral theology aspects, there was the person leading the class said that, all right, if you tell me that you're anti-abortion and pro-death penalty, I'm going to eat you up and spit you out. And
non-violently.
And the 2 police officers were of that ilk, and they had a very difficult time trying to convince themselves, as well as the professor in the class, that there was no other way than their way, as far as saying that, well, yes, one, you're, protecting life by being anti-abortion, but the other person took a life, so they don't deserve to live anymore. And the church has generally said, for a very long time at this point, was that society has a right to protect itself and should do so. But there are many ways to protect society without resorting to taking a life, because at that point, the state in taking a life is no better than the person who committed that crime, that sin, that breaking God's trust of life for all. And as it sort of hits home, we're sort of marveled at stories in the newspaper where you have certain families that'll say that, no, I do not want to have capital punishment for this person that murdered a family member. And we are in awe when we see that. It seems to be so different of going against the eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth type approach. And a lot of people have a very difficult time with that. How can someone who did such a heinous act have redemption? And it's just, so when I generally hear the comment of that, capital punishment doesn't matter, I think that that's actually a relatively big statement for society of how we deal with that issue. And do we really respect life in all of its stages and means?
I think taking a look at a little bit about how the catechism itself evolved a bit over the past several decades, how St. Pope John Paul, whose feast day is next October 22, I think it is, modified the catechism to note that a capital punishment is inadmissible in a situation where the society has the ability to defend itself otherwise. So the vengeance notion for capital punishment, I think, has been off the table for a considerable period of time. But the notion of society protecting itself, Pope John Paul would say, capital punishment is not a tool in the arsenal in a Western society or in a modern society that can lock somebody down. And so there was this, if you will, wiggle room that if you were in some part of the world that did not have the resources to lock up a crazed killer, if that's what we're talking about, then to protect itself, yes, capital punishment would be admissible. But then most recently, within past couple months, Pope Francis removed that qualification and articulates a blanket statement that no, and the word used is inadmissible, that capital punishment is inadmissible, just across the board. So I think that's the position we find ourselves in now in terms of the magisterial teaching. So
was this a change what Francis did?
Well, certainly the words changed. You could make the case, I suppose, either way. Like a good lawyer, let me do it. Is that not that I'm a good lawyer, but you know what I'm saying. You know what I'm saying. If Pope Francis is saying, well, the conditions of a society being unable to defend itself no longer obtain in the 21st century, then I'm just simply fulfilling what has already been decided by Pope John Paul. To the extent those conditions don't exist, and there are societies that find themselves unable to defend themselves, then that does constitute a change, I would suspect, from what Pope Francis did over what pre-existed under Pope John Paul.
You know, with the capital punishment thing, one of the things that I always took heart in, I guess, is that capital punishment is cheaper than. I'm sorry, to lock someone up is cheaper than to actually go through the execution process with all you lawyers. Mm-hmm. And the other aspect is, well, what if when you're wrong? You're wrong. How do you bring that person back? Don't. But I also have to say that as a father of 3 daughters, I look at if someone were to hurt them, I'd want to make sure that can never happen again to somebody else's daughter. I mean, certainly I would feel the rage and want to retaliate, but that I can see is wrong. That wouldn't stop me, but I can see is wrong. But in our society, these guys are let out again, and now we got the courts that are saying, well, these guys got to have cable TV, these guys got to have life it is, and you know what? I don't want the murder of my child having a nice life for the rest of his life, for depriving me of her God-given right and dignity. So when does this become academic, and when does it become real world?
Well, I think it becomes real world when you go and sign up to endorse the prohibition on capital punishment and see it as an awful call to conversion of myself, of walking down a road that I don't want to take, because you're right. Vengeance is sweet. We may want that. We may fear the political system not locking people up. But I think this is a challenge. This prohibition on capital punishment is a challenge that frankly is something that we need to grow into. I need to grow into.
Go ahead, Dave.
Well, one of the things something that you just said, but also you said before about whether there was a change with Francis from previous popes, and I would argue the side of it as saying that the norm was always there. The question is our interpretation of the norm and how we put it into perspective. And one of the side examples of that would say slavery. And if you look at slavery throughout history, at one point it was very accepted, and then over time, over more than 1,000 years, that changed on the perspective of what it really means as far as slavery and the acceptance.
We have to be careful that there's the slavery where people are brought over ships and taken out of their home, and there's the slavery which people willfully went into an economic type of contract. I mean, we're obviously talking about the ones where people's rights were taken from them.
Yes, I think history is more of the rights were taken away from them, but that at one point in society that was very acceptable. But the norm was always that you should not control a person like that. There should be free association, free will. But it just took us that long to truly appreciate that and where we're at now.
So the end around the norm, maybe the analogy here is with capital punishment, but the end around that norm of every human being is entitled to freedom and dignity and respect is define away or limit your definition of the human being. I mean, we have these debates of shocking to our eyes, but the debates as to whether the slave is indeed fully human. And because he's not, so the argument would go, well, then the slavery's not quite so bad.
Well, that's the same argument with the child in the womb. Is that a human or not at this point? The same type of people
Sure.
make the same argument. But I have another thing for capital punishment. Would it be wrong to say that the church is asking us to do something that Jesus did himself? I mean, that if Jesus can forgive the people who put him on a cross, which was capital punishment, is it the same thing that we're asking ourselves to do the same thing? We're asking us as followers of Christ and the teaching of Christ, aren't we being told, look what Jesus did, we are to follow his way? Or is that a wrong perspective?
No, that's what I was alluding to before. You know, there's this line from Brothers Karamazov, Dostoevsky's novel. One of the characters in there says that love is a harsh and dreadful thing. And taking that road of forgiveness, of non-violence against the murderer, that's a harsh and dreadful thing that we're asked to do. But I agree. I think we're called to that. And who wants to do that? You know, not me. But
Yeah. Well, there's also one of the other things of redemption as well.
mm,
That there was one act, but God's grace is available to redeem yourself. And so who are we to deny God the ability to do that,
yeah.
or the opportunity for someone to accept that?
And I think at bottom we know that. You know, Dave, you mentioned earlier about we stand in awe of the family that forgives the murderer. I mean, we think of the murders a number of years ago, a dozen years ago, in the Amish community, where the Amish ministered to the family of the murderer and forgave the murderer. And we are just awestruck, befuddled, but yet we're challenged and called forth to do the same sort of thing ourselves.
How about St. Maria Goretti, whose murderer was at her canonization?
Right.
I mean,
that's
that's
sitting
just,
with mom or brothers or some
Yeah.
family. Oh, just amazing. Yeah.
I think we need to spend time reflecting on that aspect, and we want healing for the victims or the families that are going through there, and is capital punishment a healing aspect of it? So I think we can say that vengeance is not a healing.
Yeah, and it maybe this is off the wall. I sometimes am often in a church that is rent now with controversy and with scandal and distrust of bishops and hierarchy.
Vicars of the diaconate.
Yeah. When we take these bold steps, such as standing in resistance to capital punishment, when we make this pursuit of forgiveness a sign of who we are, that's when we're at our best. That's when people can recognize the church for the institution that it's called to be, something, a beacon on the hill, if you will. This is the sort of position, sort of stance that I think gives courage to people. It calls us farther and deeper than we're naturally inclined to want to go.
I think that's true with most of the social justice issues. I think you hit one of the nails on the head, that so much for your words, show me your actions.
Yeah.
And because that's where your heart is truly at. And I think that's what we're all called to do, is by our actions. It's nice to agree with these intellectually,
Right.
but our actions are how we're going to be measured.
I think we're called to actually take time to actually reflect on these. And I don't, we're taking and breaking apart respect life issues, how often do we do, even in our own lives, how often do we do that? But unless we do break these apart and have the conversation, how do you have an informed conscience? We talk about conscience rights. Well, conscience is not opinions. It's actually working through and understanding the issues for doing that. And I think we get wrapped up in the emotions, we get wrapped up in the media, we get wrapped up in what we hear, but we don't sit back and say, whoa, what did Jesus say about this? As he was on the cross and was murdered. Let's get back from the emotions and say, where is the respect for life? Where is the aspect of it? And it's so important that we do that as we're going into a voting season for that. The church isn't going to tell us to vote for any particular candidate, thank God. But at the same time, John Paul says, if you have a candidate that's not respecting life, how can you follow that candidate wherever they're going to go? And that's it's not just abortion, it's all these issues that have to be incorporated into our viewpoint in the election period. And that's what we need to sit back and reflect and take some time. And that's when democracy works.
I agree, but I think one of the things that Richard said earlier is true. If you're going to be going that route, that doesn't mean every single respect life issue is of the same equality. You, by conscience, you have to decide, what you're called to do under, in those circumstances.
And that's true, Dave. That's why I'm going to give you a list of all the people that you should vote for so that you don't have to worry about these particular issues. So if you just follow what Greg says, we'll be better off.
Really? Wow.
I'm afraid.
I'm afraid of that too. So, but that's, no, we shouldn't be listening to what Greg says or anyone else says. We should be reflecting on these in ourselves, because when we talk about the Imago Dei, yes, God has given us dignity, but do we live a life of a dignified person? We'll talk about this as we get back. We're entering into our third and last break, or second and last break, here on WSFI 88.5 on your FM dial. You're listening to the Deacons Roundtable, and we'll be right back.
Hi, this is Wes Riccio from the Holy Family Catholic Bookstore. If you have a child, grandchild, or godchild being baptized, receiving their first Holy Communion, or being confirmed, remember that Holy Family has the area's largest selection of gifts, accessories, and supplies to make their special day more memorable. For baptism, we have cradle medals, baby Bibles, wall crosses, and nightlights. We have beautiful baptismal gowns and accessories, as well as invitations and cards. If you have a First Holy Communion in your family, we have a wide variety of Mass books and gift sets, rosaries and medals. We have exquisite veils for the girls and ties for the boys, along with all of the necessary party supplies. Our suggestions for new confirmands include personal-sized Bibles, prayer books, and other spiritual readings that can follow them through their lifetime. And don't forget the godparents and sponsors. We have gifts and cards for them as well. The Holy Family Catholic Bookstore is at 9249 Old Green Bay Road, Pleasant Prairie, Wisconsin. More information is available on Facebook.
Want an example of a false sense of security? How about relying on the life insurance you get through work to pay for all of your final expenses? Do you have plans to retire someday? Or do you plan on working for that company for the rest of your life? The fact is, you may lose your life insurance when you leave a company. I'm Matt Tomlinson from Catholic Financial Life, and I invite you to share your hopes and dreams with me. To discuss your options for protecting your family, call me at 847-548-MATT. That's 847-548-6288. Products and services not available in all states.
We are back on the Deacons Roundtable on WSFI FM 88.5 until we go national. And I'm here with Deacon Dick Hudzik and with...
My agent will be on, is working the deal.
We'll double your pay. And we're here with Deacon Dave Egan from the Village of Victory Lakes. And, Dave, you're at a senior community, and we all have to worry about life issues as we drive home, but they're certainly present in the Victory Lakes type of situation as assisted living and a nursing home type of situation. How does that play into your ministry?
Great question. I'm sort of shocked at that sort of issue.
Are you offended?
No, not yet.
Okay.
I'm working on it.
I don't think that has really... I've not really seen that as more of an issue, and it's more... At least in that community, and actually the community that my mother's in, which is a similar type situation, is a very different approach to death and respecting life as you have it. One of the things that, something that you would not put up with when, you're 20, 30, 40, sure. 50, but you will put up with when you're, 70, 80, 90. And... there's sort of, in general, looking at life as a gift that comes each day. So I mean, I don't know if that's answering the question that
certainly. Well, when I think of Victory Lakes, of course, we both know my mother was up there. Thomas Earnhardt, a very famous bioethicist, talked about the autonomy as the right to be left alone. And I certainly know that in my own mother's life. And the nurses at Victory Lakes were great about making sure my mother had autonomy in making decisions. Although there's a point where autonomy stops. That's one of the aspects of what we're talking about, respect life. It's not just what I want. Life is more to that. Your life what you want cannot infringe on the dignity of another life, because that life is equal in the eyes of God.
Autonomy can also be delusional.
Certainly.
And I think of, we think of our grandmothers who could not do enough for us. And stepping into the issue of euthanasia is that a person such as, my grandmother, our grandmothers, our mothers, who faced with the prospect of checking out, of assisted suicide, of cooperating with their own demise in the name of autonomy, is, I think, can be an illusory autonomy, because that notion of generosity and giving, they will falsely pursue by getting out of the way. I don't want to be a burden to the children. I don't want to hurt. I don't want to spend all their money. And so their whole lives have been one of self-donation, and they're prepared in the name of autonomy, perhaps, but or a false sense of charity, they will remove themselves from the scene. And all you have to do is suggest it and give them that option, and they'll take it. And it's a sad thing, I think.
That's all the time we have this week. Tune in next week at this same time for the conclusion of this broadcast. Thank you for listening to another edition of WQPH's Local Matters. We hope you enjoyed the broadcast and hope you have a blessed week.